justice system.
I call Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At around about March or April of this year, a number of the members of the then Law and Order Committee of the previous Parliament attended Parole Board hearings around New Zealand as part of our consideration of a bill before us, and one of the prisoners who came before the board in Mount Eden prison, which was the hearing I attended, was a prisoner who was being recalled, or ended up being recalled, because they were detected hanging around a mall, observing young children with a cell phone, taking photos, clearly in contravention of their conditions of release. And it was quite a chilling experience for a lay person, and a number of us on the committee observed these hearings up and down the country. He was a prisoner who clearly, against the conditions of his release, could not resist going to a mall, even though he had been forbidden to do so, could not resist getting a cell phone and taking photos, even though he had been forbidden to do so, was of course returned to prison. And so when I have a look at some of the statistics and note that high-risk child sex offenders, which are targeted by the extended supervision orders which we are discussing today, are 4 times more likely to sexually reoffend against children than the lower risk, if there is such a thing, child risk offender, then these 2 bills we are discussing today are timely. First, I'll turn to the public safety, public protection orders. This is being considered by the Law and Order Committee and empowers the High Court to issue a public protection order that would allow for the detention of a subject, a prisoner, in a secure facility. It's aimed at people who reach the end of a finite prison sentence, and the question for us is, what do we do with prisoners who are about to reach the end of their sentence? Clearly, no government is of a mind to simply open the prison gate, say good luck, don't want to see you back again. It hasn't happened for many, many years. Nor do we wish to release prisoners who then go on to very quickly reoffend. And when we think about that statistic, where at the higher level or the more serious level of offending, those who offend sexually against children are 4 times more likely to reoffend, then that does give us all across this House pause for concern. This Public Safety, Public Protection Orders Bill provides for those who are within 6 months of being released at the end of their sentence, or for those who are subject already to the most intensive form of extended supervision order. So the test must be high, though, and the previous speaker did rightly raise the question of we need to get the balance right between keeping society safe from these offenders, but also the issue of the rights of those offenders who are coming to the end of their sentence. And so the test is very high, requiring that a person must pose a very high risk of imminent and serious sexual or violent offending. So how do you test that? Well, under the provisions of this bill, offenders will undergo a comprehensive risk assessment, and a person must have all of the following 4 characteristics, and they must be at a very high level. So first of all, they must have an intense drive or urge to enact the particular form of offending. They must have very poor self-regulatory capacity, evidenced by general impulsiveness, high emotional reactivity, inability to cope. Absence of understanding and concern for the impacts of their offending on their victims, or potential victims, and poor interpersonal relationships or social isolation. Now, when these prisoners are within secure facilities such as Mount Eden, they are closely monitored. They go through a number of programs. So while it might be argued that these thresholds can be subjective, but I think we need to be very careful that we set the threshold high enough to protect those most vulnerable members of our society. Just briefly, a few words on the other bill under discussion today, and that is the Parole Extended Supervision Orders Amendment Bill. And this bill enables the Department of Corrections to manage extended supervision orders for as long as is necessary for serious sexual and violent offenders who are at a high risk of reoffending and who do not meet the threshold required by the Public Safety Public Protection Orders Bill. So these bills work together. I want to come back in closing to the reason why these bills have been brought before the House, and that is because while the Corrections Service has a focus on reintegration and rehabilitation so that prisoners have a chance of going back into society, going back to their families, having a different life, a productive life, and we all want that for them. But at a certain point in time, there are offenders within our corrections system who do pose a very, very high risk to our children, to women, to men, and we must protect those people. Mr. Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
I call Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As most people are aware across the House, that I've made a commitment to the elimination of sexual and physical violence across New Zealand. And so it is with pleasure that I rise in support of this bill. I think it's a very important bill. It's only going to address a small part of the problem. The problem of sexual